Yo, we are at day 7. Yeah, I think we're at day 7. And as promised in the last episode, I'll call it an episode, it's the last video, I ended on the topic of intuition. I'm just starting my timer. Yeah, intuition. To kick off, intuition it's somewhat different for each person. It seems to be this unspoken, felt thing around intuition that has been talked about for years. And the way that people use this in their regular lives is something like someone will walk in a room and they'll say, there was something just a little bit off about that guy. Or they will be, going to buy a car and they're like, that's something that didn't feel quite right. As far as intuition goes, there is the times when you'll have a mother, will have mother's instinct and intuition. I feel like this instinct and intuition are quite finely woven, however, slightly different in their approach, in how they come up. And we're going to go into this. Go into my perspective around it and how I view it. And I don't state any of this stuff as absolute truth, because I don't believe that humans know what absolute truth is. What I will share, however, is my truth and what my understanding of it is, and in hopes that it resonates with you as well, or doesn't, or brings up something for debate, brings up a certain... I'd love to have conversation about all this stuff, because when we can all meet in a conversation and have a different perspective, or the same perspective, and then we can meet together and create an understanding that is greater than the thing that we're actually discussing. That is the kind of conversations that I love, and I'll be inviting more of them in. So if you watch this and you are feeling conflicting within your positioning, or you feel like something that I've said is going against what you think, or it's in agreement with that, let's have a chat. It'd be really cool to explore it further. And so with this intuition, I discovered it over the last few years, and it was upon my earlier explorations with plant medicines and starting to do a lot of self-development work. I started to become aware that there were feelings in my body, and it wasn't just me being drowned in anxiety, because that was part of my past. It was more so of I noticed certain people that it would arise, that it would come up with. There were certain circumstances where these same feelings would arise. And yes, it was kind of a mix of anxiety and the dread of being around these spaces. So when I was feeling these things, I had a really hard time trying to discern what my intuition was, what my instinct was, and what was simply me recreating and being in a trauma response ultimately, where I would find myself in fight or flight. Sometimes it's just because I'd had too much coffee and I felt dreadful. The main thing is though that I was feeling stuff in my body and I was aware of it. This is often the empath's journey, and people realizing that they're an empath, which is quite a funny concept really when you consider that we're all born as empaths and we forget. As a child, we're naturally empathic. We feel everything that our parents feel, or that our mother feels specifically. And then our environments, when people enter our environment, and for example, you have a child and someone walks into the room, that child doesn't actually know what that person's saying. It doesn't know the person's stories. All it knows is the feeling that it has around that person. And that person may feel delightful. They may feel like an absolute pleasure to be around. And those circumstances, the child will look forward to seeing that adult again. In the circumstances where they don't feel good, where they feel under threat, there is a lack of integrity and a severe lack of integrity on the person's part, the person who's entering the room. The child may cry. The child will just not like being around that person. And the same thing goes for a dog as well. And cats, they tend to like certain people for certain reasons, and they'll bark at people who have a bad vibe. And so as the child matures and they become more, let's say, socialized, then they start to hide away this empathic nature within them. And they start to rationalize everything. All of a sudden, everything at school is all about the mind. It's about mind this, mind that. It's maths, English. It's about getting the words right. It's about writing stories. It's about it's about retaining information. It's about being ultimately a good slave and really someone that's good for the workforce. And that's a rabbit hole we could go into for a long time about the education system and the integrity or lack thereof within the education system. Getting back on track with the intuition, as we become older and we start to shed some of these layers and we start to ask some deep questions about life. What is the true nature of reality? What is, why are we here? And then we can start asking, well, why do I feel these certain things? And as we feel them, we can allow them to sort of process through our bodies. And it wasn't until about 1 or 2 years ago, I'd say intuition really hit me hard in the beginning of last year. And that was me going through a breakup. I had not really been feeling my feelings in my body very much. I was avoiding them most of the time, and every time a feeling or emotion would come up, I would dip up into my head, I would rationalize it, come up with a story, and just shove it down. And so after this breakup, I went through the last year of focusing on my heart. And through this exploration of the heart, I realized this deeper sense of intuition. The way this showed up for me was when I was around certain people, I would feel my heart felt open, and then other people it would feel closed. And so what was happening is I would get this almost a burning sensation. It was like this aliveness that I felt in my chest when it came to making big decisions. And the way that basically every decision that I've made in the past has been made from my mind. And during this year, I've started making choices based off this. And if my heart feels good, then I make the choice and I say, yes, sure. Now this leads me to this concept around intuition and what intuition is to me. It seems very clear a lot of the time as far as intuition, as far as a guiding light to give a point of direction. I'm really having troubles explaining this. We'll see how we go with it. I realize there's so many components to intuition that I haven't quite integrated yet. I'll give it my best go. So we have our heart intuition. Then we have our instinct, which is that gut instinct. That is when the nervous system fries up and the nervous system says, no, do not go here. And we go into freeze response. We go into fight or flight, we go into aggression mode. This is like a gut instinct. This is very primal, and it's like it senses danger. That's pretty much what it's designed to do. It doesn't seem to, in my estimation, doesn't seem to have a sense of direction. It seems to be more linked in with the past than intuition. And so I would say for myself, that instinct is based off what has happened in the past, what is safe and what is not safe. And then my nervous system will either freeze up or it will stay open and safe depending on the circumstance. So if there's things and traumas in my past that I haven't integrated yet, if I haven't actually reconsolidated them, then my body will respond as far as instinctually and will say, this is unsafe, don't go here. It could be simply going out in public. It could be going out in public can instinctually, I go, no, my instincts tell me this is a bad idea. And within that is like, well, cool. The instincts are there to keep us safe. And it's more of like a reptilian brain or I'm going to research this deeper to be able to explain this in a more scientific way. So as far as the intuition, it seems more forward, future focused. Because every time I had a circumstance that is going to impact my future, making a big choice and where I'm stepping into a direction that's going to grow me or not grow me, this is the distinction here, is that my heart will say yes. It's a very quiet whisper sometimes, and sometimes it's absolutely screaming. And so within that is being able to discern what is my heart saying yes or no, what is my instinct that's saying yes or no, and what is my brain saying as yes or no, because they're all going to be different things. They're going to often say different things. And then you've got the sexual center, which is also full of chemistry and aliveness. There's something, that's a different topic altogether on Eros, which is something that I'm exploring. So within these three frames, we've got the three brains, right? So three brains, and if they don't align, if they don't agree with one another, there's an incoherence. So if my heart says yes, and my nervous system is saying hell no, my brain's probably going to kick up an ego response as well and say, well, it's going to come up with a story as to why I shouldn't do the thing, even when my heart says yes. And so being able to lead with the heart is to lead with intuition. And this takes some training. It takes some, let's say, reprogramming work or reconsolidation work of the past, so that when those opportunities arise, we don't see them as danger or as something that is a threat to us. We can see it as something that's expansive. This is a big reframing concept. And so looking at intuition, it can then go into a deeper concept, which is on top of the yes and the no, and on top of the either ego response or letting the ego go, because the ego usually dies when we make an intuitive decision to move forward, because there's an old part of us that wants to hold on. When we move forward into that is one form of intuition. Then we have the channeling type of intuition, which is more so as something that I'm going into over the next couple of weeks. And it started to land over this week of channeling information that is within this reality, within the universe. And the easiest explanation I have for this, without getting too woo-woo, is songwriting. I've been a musician for a long time, and I enter a space when I'm writing poetry or when I'm doing songs where I put the pen to the paper and I will just not think. Like my mind switches off. I go into this timeless space where it's not my heart, it's not my mind, it's not my gut, it's not my nervous system. None of these are really operating. All that's happening is this clear channel that's opening up, and I just write whatever word comes through. And I'm like, yep, write these words. And I look back on it and go, oh, I'm quite surprised it's what's come up. And so that's the deeper level of intuition. I would like words to describe these, and I think they're probably more leaning towards the channeling side of things versus intuition of being a yes or no. I will define these at some point. So what happens when people enter this intuitive space is can be a lot of fear. Honestly, I was fucking terrified when I started realizing I had this empathic feeling thing, and I started standing in front of people, talking with people, and this happened on some coaching calls as well, where I would sit with someone and I'd ask them what they were feeling in their body, and they would describe the exact feeling that I had in my body. And it was at those moments that I knew that we were empathically linked. There is this idea that when we're empathically linked, when we don't have strong judgments towards a person, and when we're sitting in love and reverence of someone, there is this connection that's formed, which is empathic, where we can feel what the other person's feeling. We can almost hear the other person's thoughts. We can almost preempt their thoughts. And this would have happened with maybe certain siblings, or maybe a best friend, someone that you've been really, really close with over the years. And so we create this empathic link. However, where it starts to diminish, I was reading a book by Lujan Matus a few years ago, and he talks about this empathic link. What happens when we don't expect anything from someone else, and we're not trying to manipulate a response out of someone. We're being open, clear, coherent, and we simply want the best for that person without trying to fix them, without trying to do all of the extra layers on top of things. That this connection is formed. And this bond is either there or it's not. And what he said was that, yeah, if someone tries to manipulate a response out of someone, that empathic response goes. Or if someone tries to impress someone, basically when the ego comes in, that empathic response is not going to be there clearly. This is also something that happens in relationships. We can be in this beautiful, open, loving, empathic communion, and then all of a sudden someone's triggered. And when someone's triggered, there's no true empathic connection between the bodies, because the flow is stopped off. And you'd also feel this in a conversation with, let's go back to the relationship side. So as soon as once you have the conversation with that person, that empathic channel can open back up again. And you'll often feel this as a flood of feelings, and I feel so much better now, because that empathic connection that was there is now open again. Where it was, we hit a block. It's trying to square peg in a round hole. And so, this is what I've been looking to articulate for quite a while. And I'm grateful for these videos, and I'm grateful for you for listening to me go through all these thoughts. Because collecting our thoughts is not necessarily the easiest task, especially via video, and especially whilst people are watching. There are so many things that have come up for me intuitively whilst I've been doing these videos over the last 6 days, where I think of a topic and I have something drop in. You call it intuition, right? Have this intuitive feeling to talk about something. And there's certain topics that I won't bring up, and I'll stop myself. And what that does is stops my flow in my conversation, stops the flow in what I'm talking about. And so I'm really noting this. It can be difficult to move through. And because we've been conditioned to say certain things and not say certain things. So something that may be intuitive to bring up may be too much for someone. You may have been told that you're too much for bringing up this intuition. And say an experience that I've had with people's intuition in the past is that saying the intuitive thing that's coming up for you, if you're intuitively feeling like getting a channeling download from about someone, or you feel this empathic link where you understand something about this other person, I don't believe it is your responsibility to tell them. Now, you could bring it up to them and say, hey, are you open to something? However, my experience in the past, when people have said they have felt X, Y, Z in my field, it feels like an intrusion. And this is, let's say, the dark sides of empathic connection. We're all empathic by nature. However, until people are openly in that space of feeling empathic and feeling open towards people, you coming in with an empathic or intuitive insight towards someone's life probably won't be received. It doesn't matter how true it is. It doesn't matter how, like, to the T that is. What happens is that by you knowing something about someone else that they don't know themselves, you remove their authority. You assume external authority. Now, unless that person's actually asked you for it, this comes in as an undercutting. And I've definitely done this a lot over the years. So if you are an intuitive, you're an empath, please ask permission. Ask permission to tell people what you've noticed about them or what you've felt in their field, to see if they're even open to it, and be okay with a no. Because what this does is creates this distortion field where you may have something to say and that person realizes that they've been seen. And when that person realizes they've been seen, they will shut down. They will come up with a story. They may throw hate. They may throw all sorts of things at you. And because it feels like people are trying to be fixed. And as empaths, we often want to fix people. That's a shadow of mine. The shadow of that intuitive streak, that empathetic nature. And so moving deeper into intuition and where it's led me in my life. So intuition has led me on a wild ride this year. I've signed up for 2 massive coaching programs that this is the one that happened at the beginning or maybe midway through last year. Sitting in an event room, and the guy who was running it, he brought up this concept of who wants to double their flow. And the concept was, if you were to clone yourself, how valuable would that be to you? And I thought, you know what, that would be really great. And so as he went along, he got onto the pitch part of the day. And I was like, well, I'm not going to buy anything. I had no intention of buying anything. And I was like, I don't want to. Then he brought up the pitch and said, without knowing the price, who's interested in signing up? And so all I could feel was this intensity in my heart. And because I'd been focusing on my heart for about 6 months at that point, I was very attuned to its movements and feelings. And I was like, this isn't something that I feel often. This feels like it's pulling me in a direction. This feels like the biggest yes I've ever felt in my entire life. And so I brought it up to him And he looked at me and said, I'm not going to sell you anymore. It's either a yes or a no from you. What is that feeling about? And I was like, it's telling me yes. And I'm like, I don't have the money for it. I don't know where I'd get money for it. All of these things. And eventually the tension in the room was so much that one of the other guys in the room just got up and he went straight to the back of the room, not knowing the price. And so I was like, oh, fuck. Okay, I'm going to do it. So we started, I popped off as well. Went to the back of the room, made one of the most powerful decisions that I've ever made in my entire life. And now I'm doing deeper work with him, learning more and more and more about how to reconsolidate my past. And this has opened up more intuitive channels because of following this. It's now led me into another workshop room with another woman who does light language and contacts beings. This is getting into the woo-woo space. And I was like, this is something that I would have never been interested in the past. And I sat in that room and I had the same feeling. And mind you, these people selling weren't sitting there putting the hard sell on. They're not going like, everyone get to the back of the room. There was none of that. It was simply, if this is you, go to the back. And again, made another decision. I was like, I'll just do it. Sure, I'll sign up. And so this month I have big events for both of those things. I've got a 3-day event for this light codes one, is learning how to deepen this intuition and channeling part of myself, the spiritual side, so to speak. And then a 6-day with, unpacking all of this old past stuff and integrating it back into reality, into the present. I'd like to go deeper onto this topic of intuition when I can articulate it more. And moving forward, I will probably go to have someone on the podcast when I launch the podcast again and learn some more about this stuff. Because I'm realizing the more that I talk about topics that I'm not very good at teaching, the flow ends up off because I don't have the information and I haven't taught it. However, if you've made it this far, then great. You're seeing me stumble and you're seeing me in my imperfections and trying new things. And it feels far less terrifying than it was. Well, it's not really terrifying anymore because I'm just allowing myself to be me. And my goals and ambitions are to be on some big stages, like really big stages in the next couple of years, and public speaking about the topic that I'm most passionate about, which is the voice, which is connection, which is communication. It's the soul's voice. So maybe in these future ones, I'll be just riffing on those ideas and deepening and deepening and deepening and deepening. Realizing sometimes that the topic of conversation that we go into, sometimes wider isn't better. Because I can talk about all sorts of topics, but I'm not actually an expert or like for example, I couldn't talk very much about breath work. I couldn't talk very much about, the quantum realm. There's certain topics that I don't go into. So this is, a really big highlighter for myself to stay in my own lane, so to speak. Stay within the topics that make the most sense to me, that I can flow with, and dive deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the voice. And I'm going to treat this as if it were a class or a workshop, like a master class. So if you turn up to this in the future, expect me to be riffing on a lot of the same ideas, and I'm going to be deepening within them. I'm going to write out a list of stuff that I'm going to riff on and cycle between, because there's certain topics that I want to get really good at telling. This is going to be me telling my past story, me rewriting the story of my past and telling it more eloquently, and to be able to entertain whilst doing it. So yes, note that these will be practice sessions, and you can follow along on the journey. It's kind of like coming to a music performance. It's like where someone is playing music and you may hear them each day practicing. You're either going to really hate what I'm talking about and feel like I'm a broken record, or you're going to possibly really enjoy it. Maybe you'll learn a lot from seeing my progression and seeing how much I'm going to be refined by the end of this 30 days. And maybe once 30 days are up, I'll go into maybe a once a week. And that will be actually the launch of my podcast. So I feel like it's definitely time for the podcast. The podcast is called Masters of Attention, and I will be having guest interviewees on there, and roughly once a month, maybe once every 2 weeks. We'll see how it goes. And I'll be doing episodes like this in between those. So have a great day, and yeah, peace out.